So, how exactly has the financial system failed us? And what exactly are banks doing that they're not necessarily sharing with us? We're going to be discussing this and more with our special guest, Vrinda Gupta, who is a powerhouse woman in FinTech. And she is out there disrupting these streets and making sure that she bridges this gap. So let's go and get started. Bienvenida to Her Dinero Matters, the podcast helping Latinas have increased confidence and control over their finances. I am Jen Hemphill, and over the years, I've been on a mission to empower countless of women like you through this podcast and through my financial counseling services. Now, my expertise isn't just a result of my own life experiences or a few Google searches. I also became an accredited financial counselor that helps me serve you at a higher standard. Now, if you've been liking what you're seeing and hearing, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Now, let's get the show started. As we get rolling with today's episode, remember to stay with us. I've got a special announcement coming up at the midpoint that you definitely won't want to miss. As Latinas, you and I know that there are specific barriers that don't work with us, that work against us in our community. Now, we're not going to be diving into those specific barriers that really impact our community, but really it's more about how these barriers, how the system is not working for us as women, which naturally really goes into those other barriers. So there's a fit, right? I have brought the absolutely perfect person for this discussion. Vrinda Gupta is a woman in FinTech herself and the CEO and founder of Sequin. Now, she herself has encountered how the system has failed her, and just wait till you hear the full chisme in this episode to see how this impacted her and why she is out here making sure that she makes change, she makes an impact on bridging those gaps that are existing at this moment that don't really work for us, but instead it works against us in different ways. My hopes that with today's conversation is that you get the knowledge, that you have a light bulb moment, that you really see how this conversation today, what we're talking about today, how your financial education, how knowledge is power, what it can do to really change and empower you with when you're using banks, when you're applying for a credit card, when you're doing all those things. Because again, the financial system, it hasn't been set up for us. It's been set up for the white male. That's who created this system, right? Now, whether it was ill-intentioned or I don't think it was ill-intentioned. It's just they were creating it. They weren't thinking outside of who they needed to serve. They were just creating something. But anyways, that's for another conversation. But for now, let's focus on today's conversation and let's meet Vrinda. Welcome, Verinda. I'm so thrilled to have you here. I know before we started recording, I really took a moment just to congratulate you and what you're doing, because what you're doing is just a huge undertaking, and I really applaud you with that. So congrats again. And we always start off on this podcast by learning about you. So if you could just take us back to a moment in time, it could be when you were a little girl or maybe just later on in life, where you had an experience, whether you heard something or again, an experience that really impacted you, how you view and perceive money, even to this day. So take us back.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Jen, for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. And I love the question that you started with, because attitudes towards money do start when you're really young. And so for me personally, my family and I are first generation immigrants from India. And, one of the pieces that I always noticed was my mom was really afraid of the US financial system. However, that woman is a feisty immigrant mother, and I'm sure so many of us here can relate. And, it was the one time where I really felt she did not feel in control. She did not feel empowered. And she really deferred to my dad for big financial decisions. And I recall, she'd be talking to customer service representatives, and you would not want to be on the other side of that conversation. But the second that it would be anything banking related, my mom would just give the phone to my dad, and my dad would end up making these, important decisions for our family. And so early on, I started associating money with power. And I realized that having an education around money and feeling confident around money and finances really is something that is so important in terms of equality, and was one of the reasons why I wanted to work in financial services myself when I got my first job, was to really empower myself and ultimately empower my mom and the other, women around me.
Love it. And how did that, because you saw your mom, the same, I've seen the same thing in my household. My dad has always took care of the finances, because when it
Yeah.
comes to calling the bank or doing those things, my mom was like, nope, you can do it.
Yeah.
But so you saw your dad taking charge of those conversations or taking charge of those roles. How did that have an impact on you creating your company, Sequin, today? Or did it? Or was there any influence? If so, like tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, watching my mom really struggle, it was something that both my mom and dad told me that, especially as an immigrant, understanding the US financial system is so important because it is complex and it is, different from financial systems in other countries. And so, my first job that I got after I graduated from college was actually at Visa. And I wanted to understand how the financial system worked, and I wanted to feel empowered. And I worked at Visa for almost 5 years as a product manager. I was building popular credit cards. I built a very high end one called the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And when I went to apply for the credit card that I helped build, I got rejected. And it was this moment where everything kind of came tumbling down on me, where the reason I wanted to work in financial services was to feel empowered and was to break this kind of generational money trauma, especially as it related to the women in our family. And the fact that I had been left out of the product that I helped create, it made me think so much about, okay, one, I have not made as much progress as I thought that I had. But second, if this was happening to me, then what was happening to so many other people around me, especially women, especially minorities? And that led me to an entire exploration of who the financial system was built for and who it wasn't built for. And ultimately, the spoiler here is, women and minorities could be actively rejected from bank accounts, from credit cards, from business loans up until the 70s without a male cosigner, which isn't recent, isn't it's not so long. That is recent history. And still today, there are so many of these gaps. So ultimately, that is what led me to say, well, women and minorities are going everywhere in this world, right? And we are striving for equality in so many different ways. Yet the financial system is really a place where there are these big gaps. And I felt that was wrong. And I also felt it was something that I could perhaps change, in a big way. So that is what ultimately inspired me to found the company Sequin.
Love it. Now, with you talk about these big gaps, can we go into detail on what are the gaps that you saw, or the gaps, the barriers, and what can we do about them? Because even though the person listening right now may have experienced this, but didn't know that this was a barrier, or really just maybe just felt defeated for one reason or another, but didn't know that this particular barrier or this gap was an issue and being whether rejected for the credit card or whatever it may be. So if you could go into a little bit of detail into what these gaps are, what the barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. This started off with me coming to this realization that the financial world was not designed to center women and minorities actively. But when I looked at what the impacts were today, it just went so much deeper than I even could have imagined when I first started on this journey. So, the first piece of information that I learned is financial education gaps and how those start really early. So one of the stats that I saw was that little girls are half as likely to receive a lesson on credit and finances by the time we reach high school than little boys are. And that means that that gap starts so early, right? In the way that parents are talking to us about finances and the way that society is talking to us about finances. I think we all know that, financial wellness is not really taught in school. So if you're not learning that in school, you're not learning that with your family. And so much of that is generational as well. Do your parents have that knowledge to pass on to you? Unfortunately, as minorities, that is much less likely. So the financial education gaps start really early, right? So that's one piece. The second piece is after you graduate and as you start even with your first bank account, those gaps start really early, and that women and minorities are more likely to make avoidable financial mistakes when it comes even to your first bank account. And so some of those are paying more in avoidable fees. Think overdraft fees, late fees, various penalties. We see that women pay 18% more in avoidable banking fees a year as compared to men. And so that's where it all starts, in addition to the gender wage gap and the fact that our lives cost us more, right? So that's kind of the second piece. And that inequity in terms of just banking fees never really closes as well. So as you look at credit, for example, women are more likely also to make avoidable credit mistakes that are affecting our credit scores. So one is just paying the minimum payment on a credit card. That means that you are carrying high interest debt, and women are more likely to carry that. Also, in terms of our credit scores, right, the different factors that go into our credit, women many times will have higher credit utilizations, and that will affect our credit scores negatively, even if we are making payments at the end of the month in full. The last thing I'll mention here is with mortgages as well. Women are paying more for mortgages, even though we are more likely to pay back on time. We're better borrowers. And so there are so many of these gaps that start because of education, but also in terms of how the financial system is built. It's not really designed to take into account the fact that there is a gender wage gap. There is an information gap. There are, different factors where our lives are costing more, and that might mean that we're behaving with financial instruments differently. So that's kind of on the financial piece. And then the third is just in terms of financial anxiety and financial confidence. Those gaps just don't really close. And we see women having greater financial anxiety, which makes sense, right? Because even though we might not be in charge of the financial decisions, we are many times in charge of household expenses. And we have different factors that we're caring for families, more likely to be caretakers, et cetera. And so there are different ways that we are looking at our financial lives and that we need to look at it, but that does, lead to more stress. And banks aren't helping. They're advertising more to men than they are to women, so we're not having these conversations. So yeah, as I went through this, I'm not sure the best analogy, but it just felt like I kept on uncovering more and more and more. And it was just the financial system not designed with women in mind was the tip of the iceberg, and then there was just so much more. And we know that by making it illegal to discriminate based off gender or other factors, that doesn't mean that the problems are solved. So still today there are so many of these gaps.
If you are a fan of this podcast, we've got something special for you. Join our exclusive weekly newsletter and be the first to know about new episodes. Plus, get insider tips, special announcements, and bonus content that's just for our email subscribers. Don't miss out on these unique insights. Head over to jenhemphill.com and sign up today to start receiving your weekly dose of financial goodness straight to your inbox. So with Sequin, how is Sequin addressing these gaps? Because I heard that some of the gaps are in education, and when you buy a house, you're paying more for a house, in the credit score and things of that sort. And also one that I hear a lot about is paying just the minimum on the credit card. And I think that's partially, I've heard, and I only have a little bit of evidence. I can't say I have done a full-blown scientific research on this, but I have heard time and time again in workshops that I have taught or clients or people that I have served that they go to a bank and maybe they're trying to build up their credit score. And granted, I think this is also not that the bank is on purpose doing this, but I think maybe it's also a lack of education on that person that is assisting the consumer, where the bank is telling them, okay, we can help you open up this credit card, and to build your credit score, just charge something monthly and pay the minimum. Which, yeah, you can build your credit score that way, but at a cost, right? You'd rather I would rather someone build their credit score without paying extra, especially in interest. But anyways, all that I got sidetracked there. So what is, with all these different gaps that you mentioned, how is Sequin addressing that? Because of course, Sequin, your mission is really to have banking, if I could use that word, because I know you're not officially a bank, and you can describe that in a minute, but how is Sequin addressing that? So addressing these gaps to serve women better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the pieces that I felt personally, but then after talking to thousands of women, have now realized that this is, a huge issue, is there's not a great solution on the market where you're both educating someone on three pillars, right? Money, credit, and wealth, and also giving them the tools to take the actions that you're recommending. And what ends up happening is, first of all, we know that there are all these financial information gaps. And so it's hard to tell, okay, what is credible, what's not, what's good for my situation personally. So there's that piece. And then the other piece is, yes, there are a bunch of different financial tools out there, but there are gotchas, right? To your point about, okay, maybe you could be building credit this way, but how much are you paying in credit card interest in order to, achieve that goal? And is that the best way to do that? And so what is really beautiful about how we've built Sequin is we essentially offer a membership, and we call it the Sequin Women's Finance Club membership. And when you come in, it unlocks three different things. The first piece is our 9-step money program, where we go through money, credit, and wealth. And we actually teach you, okay, what do you need to know and in what order, right? And the questions I get a lot are, should I be paying off my credit card debt, or should I be investing? Or should I have an emergency fund, or should I, pay off some of the credit card debt? They're questions about order. They're questions about what things mean. What are the 101s? And then actually, what is good for you and your stage? So in our money program, we actually go through what you need to know in 9 steps in order to have all of your bases covered. So that's one piece. The second piece, which is really great, are our financial tools. So we have amazing tools that help you take action against each of the kind of educational pieces that we're recommending in our money program. So the first one is our high interest checking. And essentially, you can use Sequin as your banking, and you can calculate your emergency fund and grow your emergency fund in Sequin. You can actually connect your direct deposit to Sequin and have that grow at high interest. One of the dirty secrets that your bank doesn't want you to know is that they might be offering you 0.01% in interest on your money, but they are making so much more lending that money out, and they're only giving you 0.01% back, not 1%. 0.01%, and they're pocketing the rest. So at Sequin, we give you all of the interest back that we earn on your money. We believe that's yours, and that grows your money so much faster without it having to be locked away anywhere. So we'll give you access to tools like high interest checking. It doesn't really exist on the market. There are some places, but it's more gate kept. You have to jump through hoops to get it. We also have a bunch of amazing credit tools to help you build credit, to pay off off debt. We have, a bunch of just financial resources that you can actually take action on the kind of guidance that you have. And there's no gotchas. We don't have, okay, we're going to pay you an overdraft. We don't even allow you to overdraft on Sequin. So there's no gotchas once you're in. And we just want it to feel really kind of safe and supportive and that you are making the right financial decisions for you. And then the third part that I really love is the guidance and the community. And so you can kind of DIY a lot of this in Sequin, but if you do want that accountability, which I know I definitely need personally, we do a lot of workshops around each of our money, credit, wealth topics. You're able to plug into the community. You can do money therapy sessions, and all of these things are available in our membership. And the reason that we built it this way, Jen, was twofold. The first was thinking about your question, right? What is different for women and how are we actually addressing this? There's not a place where you can really get the combination of that guidance, know that it's credible, get that education, and then actually have the tools to take those actions and stay accountable. But the second piece is that we really pride ourselves on listening and truly designing this with women in mind, with minorities in mind. And so we are constantly talking to our members, getting feedback. And that's the way that we've built so many of our tools. And that, people are saying, I just wish I had this. Why doesn't this exist? And we say, okay, yeah, we can build that for you. And so this truly is kind of a community driven by women for women, but really all genders welcome.
Love it. So it's definitely very different from what we considered a traditional bank. And as I mentioned earlier, so when I was reading about Sequin, it's not a bank, but rather it's a fintech company. So
Yes.
I'm curious to know, and this is just me, how, so when you went this route, is there a reason why you went this route? I presume building a bank from the bottom up needs, I don't know, a lot of capital. I don't know. I've never even Googled, how can you just build your own bank? But what is and then maybe there's also some guidelines and laws in place that you have to follow. I don't know. I'm curious to know why you went through this structure versus becoming a traditional bank but offering what you offer. Does that make sense? Again, educate
Yes,
me
it does.
because I have no clue about what
Yes.
it is to become a bank.
Absolutely. No, this is such a great question, and I really appreciate the nuance. So, yeah, Sequin is a fintech company, and we work with a banking partner. So, the banking partner, that is where when you open a Sequin high interest checking account, your funds, your deposits are going to be in a bank account that is hosted by our banking partner. And the reason that we have the money in, that we partner with this bank is that your funds are FDIC insured, they're safe with the bank, and just a lot more secure of a structure versus us kind of holding those deposits. So by partnering with a bank, it allows us to one, make sure your money is safe with an official bank, right? They have a bank charter. They are regulated by, legal bodies. So make sure your money's safe. And on the other side of it, some of the challenges with being a bank are because there are so many different regulations and things that you need to do, a lot of your energy and your efforts become kind of working around making sure you have your charters active, et cetera. And you can't be necessarily as flexible or as innovative. And so for us, when we say, okay, you can put your money with Sequin, it can grow in a high interest checking account. That high interest checking account is all secured by the banking partner. And then all of the rest of the great resources that we're able to offer, which is, the education and the guidance and the variety of tools, those are not affiliated with the banking partner. Those are all Sequin offerings. So we're able to be a lot more nimble, a lot more agile, build very quickly. So we're able to be innovative where we want to be with you, and we're able to keep your money safe and secure by working with the banking partner. So that's kind of some of the trade-offs there. But we really love being a fintech because that's how we can be creative where it matters, but also safe by partnering.
So what I'm hearing is that you've went this way. Of course, there's a lot of regulations, as you mentioned, which I imagine there was some, laws and things. And so that way you avoid, well, you're not avoiding because you're not a bank, but basically you don't have to deal with these regulations, and rather you're able to really focus and put your time and energy where you really want to, which is serving your audience, your women. That's what I'm hearing, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So our banking partner deals with all of the regulations. So your money is safe and they can handle all of that. And then we're able to innovate, where we would like to innovate that doesn't have to do with, keeping your money safe and more giving you the insights and the guidance, et
Okay,
cetera.
wonderful. Now, you mentioned one thing about banks. When you have a checking account, you have they give you a very low interest rate. And of course, how banks make their money is taking your money and lending it to either you or other people, and charging interest on that and keeping that interest. So what are some other things that maybe we don't know about banks, or something that banks don't necessarily just get on a TikTok and tell you, you didn't know this about us? Is there anything else besides what I just shared?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm like, where do I start? So I will say this in the spirit of keeping it succinct, and there is so much more. But what I want to tell everyone is that if you are not paying for a product, you're the product, right? And so many of us say, okay, well, there are free checking accounts, so that's great. I'll go there. And what I like to just alert people of is, first of all, they aren't free, right? There are a lot of hidden fees, there are a lot of requirements, and it's really important that you educate yourself on this free thing that I'm opening. What is the catch, right? There's nothing free in this world. So looking at what are some of those fees, right? Is it overdraft? Is it late fees? Even if you're not paying some of those fees, are you making enough on interest, right? As you mentioned, Jen, the way that banks are making money is that they're taking your money, they're keeping it, they're lending it out at really high interest rates, and then they're keeping what is called the spread, which is basically the difference between the amount of money that they make by, lending it out, what they earn, and then what they have to pay you, which is very minimal. And they've decided to give you back something very minimal. So just making sure that you understand what are the criteria for keeping this bank account. Are there minimums, right? And that's fine. It's just making educated decisions, because what breaks my heart every time I hear it, and I hear it so often, is I just didn't know. And I've paid now hundreds of dollars in these fees. I paid thousands of dollars in these fees. And it's just so important to be asking the right questions, reading the fine print, and understanding what you are signing up for. And these financial tools are really critical in terms of achieving our financial goals, but also with great power is great responsibility, right? And so even with the credit card, for example, great way to build credit, great way to utilize rewards. But I always say, if you are paying interest on a credit card, you are never going to be making more in credit card rewards versus the interest that you're paying. You're not going to be building your credit effectively. So really be thinking about, how are you utilizing these tools? Is this tool right for you? What might be right for the next person, or that billboard that you see, or that celebrity marketing this product that might not actually be the right fit for you?
And what do you hope to, and I have an idea, but because you've kind of talked about it and alluded to it, but what do you hope to change in the financial system for women and minorities? And also, on top of that, what have you seen change already since you started this back in 2019?
Yeah, I love this question. My hope for the entire financial services industry is, one, transparency. I really do believe that you can do good or do well by doing good. And, it doesn't have to be, a hidden fee, which is how you're making money. Right. And so one of the ways that our Sequin membership works, for example, is you pay for the membership, and then there's no gotchas. When you're in, you have access to all of these amazing resources. And, how I felt about that was, I really appreciated the transparency, where if I know that I'm paying for something, I'm able to budget for it. I also know that I'm expecting a certain amount of value back, at least. And so I think the transparency piece is something that I hope for in the industry. And I think we're making some moves, but there's still a lot to be desired, right? I think we've all heard about some of the big banks in the
Mhm.
news and some of the things that they're doing. And, it's pretty surprising the things that, have been, getting away with over the last few years. So I think there is a little bit more attention on that. I think the second kind of piece that I hope for women, for minorities, is just feeling financially confident and knowing that how to use these tools, understanding the system, understanding how to make it work for you, and just leveling the playing field in that way, right? Because understanding how money works, understanding how credit works, understanding how wealth works, that's how you actually build generational wealth in this country. And it's really important to understand that. That's the second piece. In terms of your question, Jen, about what's changed since, I first had the concept of Sequin years ago, I think, a lot has happened, right? In the last few years, the pandemic, of course, and the outsized impact that that had on women and minorities. Also, so much of a talk of, are we going into a recession? Inflation being at all-time highs. I mean, it's a really tough market right now. And so I think there is a lot more appetite, especially with women and with minorities, thinking about our financial lives, right? And wanting to be equipped with credible financial information and wanting and demanding transparency from the tools and really making sure that you are in control of your financial life. And all of that also coincides with some good news, right? That women and minorities are getting educated at greater rates than ever. And we're in the workforce at greater rates than ever. And we're making more money than ever, which is so amazing. And so I think it's just bridging that gap between, okay, now that you have money, how are you managing that? Do you have your basics covered? Do you know what you need to do? And are you confident that you're able to be building wealth in the generational way that so many of us are, working towards every
Love it.
day?
And to wrap it up, what would you say? Because this has been a huge undertaking. And what would you say you are most proud of when it comes to Sequin and what you have accomplished so far?
Jen, you mentioned this at the beginning of the call, and building a fintech is very, very
For women
challenging. It
too.
is heavily, I mean, especially, right? As I look around, I haven't seen any other fintech that's focused on women's money, credit, and wealth, and that's actually offering a banking product. And this actually is, a huge movement for the first time in US history. We are, designing truly with women and with minorities in mind. And so I think the piece that I feel really proud of is how honest we've been to our mission, in that we genuinely listen to every single one of our members. I'm constantly on calls with our members. My teammates are constantly talking to our Sequin members as well, and truly saying, okay, give us feedback on how our product is working, and also what do you want to see, and truly kind of co-creating the future of financial services with women's voices and with minorities' voices, because the financial system as we know it today was designed actively to leave those voices out. And what we see is when we design products with women and with minorities in mind, they work better for everyone as well. And so we've really loved everything that we've built. And it truly has been because we've just genuinely had our ears open and just got feedback and listened. So I feel really proud of, even in challenging decisions, especially when it comes to business decisions, whenever it came down to, should we take the easy path and just go this way, or should we listen to our members and their needs and what's kind of in their best interest, we've always taken that road. And that's something I feel really,
Well,
really
I
proud
applaud
of.
that because just even listening, it allows you to serve them better because that's who you are serving. So why wouldn't you go and ask them? It's the most common sense. So I'm glad you've taken that approach. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, I applaud you, especially being a woman of color in fintech and garnering the financial backing that you've garnered. I applaud you. Thank you so much for being here and for what you're doing for women in the financial services space.
Thank you so much, Jan, and thank you for inviting me here and for this amazing community that you've built. It's really amazing to even see these kind of conversations happening. So I so appreciate it, and I appreciate you.
What did you think of this conversation? My hopes is that it gave you more knowledge, because knowledge is power. And with power, we're able to better maneuver the system that's not necessarily created for us. And even though it's not created for us, we can maneuver it in a way that we can come out ahead. Yes, it's going to take a little work, but it's possible. I encourage you to learn more about what Verinda is doing with Sequin. I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes. Next week, we're going to meet Mayra Garcia. She is a fellow podcaster and the voice behind Debt Free Latina. We're going to be talking about the debt-free lifestyle, as well as parenting our own kids as financial educators. It's a great conversation, and you don't want to miss that one. Bueno, pues that is everything. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. You can check out the show notes over at jenhemphill.com/386. That is jenhemphill.com/386. Another benefit of the show notes, of checking out the show notes, is that if you really enjoyed today's content in this conversation, there's going to be links of other similar episodes. So make sure to check that out. Remember that being the reina starts now simply by claiming it. I believe in you, and so should you. Nos hablaremos el próximo jueves. Chao.